You've probably pictured it the same way everyone does. Someone finds a floating log, they climb on. A few thousand years later, that log has sails. Simple, gradual, obvious. But the real answer is far stranger, and it starts with a question nobody expected. Did boats exist before modern humans did? For decades, the timeline of boat invention was treated as a footnote to civilization, something that happened after farming, after villages, after humans had settled down long enough to need to cross a river efficiently. But the evidence buried in the ground tells a completely different story, one where crossing open water isn't a late invention at all. It's ancient, older than our own species, in fact. Start with an island most people have never heard of, Flores in Indonesia. In 2003, researchers working there, led by the archaeologist Mike Morwood, uncovered the remains of a tiny hominin species, standing barely over 3 feet tall, nicknamed the Hobbit. What made the discovery extraordinary wasn't just their size, it was their location. Flores has never, in all of geological history, been connected to the Asian mainland by a land bridge. The channel separating it is deep, and the currents running through it are notoriously violent. Which means whatever species of early human reached Flores didn't walk there. They crossed open water, deliberately or accidentally, hundreds of thousands of years before Homo sapiens even existed. Does that sound impossible? It should feel that way, because for a long time, most archaeologists assumed it was. The dominant theory was that early hominins simply couldn't have built anything seaworthy. No tools sophisticated enough, no planning capacity for a multi-day voyage. So for years, the leading explanation was accidental drift, a tsunami perhaps, ripping vegetation and unlucky hominins out to sea on a floating mat of debris, carrying them to Flores by sheer chance. But then, in 2010, a geologist named Thomas Strasser and his team made a discovery on the island of Crete that made the accidental drift theory much harder to accept. They found stone tools, hand axes, dating back roughly 130,000 years. Crete, like Flores, has been surrounded by open sea for millions of years. There has never been a land bridge. And these particular tools weren't simple flakes that could have washed ashore by chance. They were deliberately shaped, multi-step tools, the kind that require a toolmaker to already be standing on the island, using it, living there. One accidental crossing to one isolated island might be explained away as extraordinary luck. Multiple crossings to multiple islands across enormous stretches of open ocean by multiple different hominin species? That starts to look less like an accident and more like a capability. So what were they using? Nobody has found a 100,000-year-old boat. Wood doesn't survive that kind of time. But look at what modern replicative experiments have shown. In 2019, a team of Japanese researchers attempted to recreate a possible Paleolithic crossing, paddling a dugout canoe built entirely with Stone Age tools across roughly 125 miles of open Pacific water from Taiwan toward the Ryukyu Islands. They succeeded. It took over 45 hours of continuous paddling using nothing but techniques and materials that would have been available tens of thousands of years ago. That experiment didn't prove exactly how ancient humans crossed to Flores or Crete, but it proved something just as important. The technology required wasn't advanced, it was achievable with the tools our ancestors already had, if they had the will, the planning, and the nerve to attempt it. Which brings us to the biggest water crossing of all. Around 65,000 years ago, modern humans reached a landmass called Sahul, the combined supercontinent that included Australia and New Guinea before rising seas separated them. To get there, they had to cross what's known as the Wallace Line, a deep water boundary that even during the lowest sea levels of the last ice age never fully closed into a land bridge. At its narrowest points, a crossing still meant tens of miles of open ocean, out of sight of land in multiple directions. The archaeologist Sue O'Connor, working at a site called Majibebe in northern Australia, uncovered stone tools and ochre dating back to that same window, evidence that anchors modern human presence in Sahul firmly within this time frame. To get there, an entire population, not just a lone drifting survivor, had to cross that water. Men, women, children, enough people to found a sustainable population on the other side. That's not consistent with an accident. That's consistent with intention, with boats or something functionally like them, built specifically to move a community across water on purpose. Here's the detail that should really sit with you. This means humans were building and using seaworthy vessels tens of thousands of years before farming, before pottery, before the wheel, before writing existed anywhere on Earth. The boat isn't a byproduct of civilization catching up to itself. In many ways, it's one of the technologies that made large parts of human civilization possible in the first place, letting our species reach islands and continents that walking alone could never have delivered us to. Think about what that reframes. We tend to imagine technological history as a straight, upward climb. Fire, then tools, then farming, then boats, then writing, in some neat, sensible order. But the water crossings to Flores, to Crete, to Sahul, all of them predate almost everything else on that list. Watercraft may be one of the very oldest deliberate technologies our lineage ever developed, older than agriculture by tens of thousands of years, built not for convenience, but for something much more urgent, reaching land that couldn't be reached any other way. And that raises an uncomfortable question about how we think of ourselves as a species. We like the story where humans are cautious, tool-optimizing rationalists, cautious animals who slowly, safely built up toward risk. But someone, at some point, packed enough food and water for their family, pushed a wooden hull into open ocean with no visible land ahead of them, and paddled anyway. That's not caution. That's one of the boldest bets our species has ever made over and over again, on different coastlines, by different hominin populations, tens of thousands of years apart. You've probably pictured it the same way everyone does. Someone finds a floating log, they climb on. A few thousand years later, that log has sails. Simple, gradual, obvious. But the real answer is far stranger, and it starts with a question nobody expected. Did boats exist before modern humans did?